couple more.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about a time when a community that you lived in and were engaged in lost a business, a local independent, and the community felt it?
Yeah, there have been a number of communities. The community that I grew up in, actually, and this is to move a little bit west of here into central New York. I grew up in a community of about 1,000 people. It was a little cow town, as we call it, that right up until the mid-1980s had this beautiful little kind of idyllic main street. You know, we had the Five and Dime. I had an aunt and uncle that actually ran a clothing store right next to that. We had a little auto parts store. I mean, it just, tree-lined streets. It was never a particularly wealthy community, but it was a very nice kind of classic, American main street. And within the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of those people retired. We had some major big box stores that came into towns around that town, and downtown became desolate. And my family continues to live there, and my family, some people in my family, I think, recognize the importance of really trying to bring that back. There have been movements actually within that town. There's been a gentleman who actually has invested a tremendous amount of money to create that feel again and to really bring commerce to the town. The reaction of people in the town, I think, has really been mixed. It's a town where there are definitely a lot of concerned citizens from the standpoint of there absolutely is no Main Street, and there has not been a Main Street for a long time. However, it's also a town that is relatively economically depressed now, so I think that a lot of folks there are simply looking at they're in survival mode. So they're not thinking about, well, when can we get more local businesses on Main Street? It's just, where do I need to go to put clothes on my kids' backs? So there has been that movement in the town too, and it's been this great kind of conglomeration of events that's happened between Main Street moving out, between jobs moving out, and I see that happening all across the country now, really, especially in some of the northern towns that kind of stretch through the belt of central New York into Ohio, into Michigan, the Rust Belt towns, basically. But there is hope out there. There are definitely some very locally minded people in that community, and that's actually, it's fairly close to a resort town too. It's fairly close to Cooperstown, New York, so they've been able to feed off of that a little bit as well. And there are some local businesses popping up now, which is nice. So I see it almost coming full circle here in the next 10 or 20 years, which I'm hopeful about because it certainly holds a place in my heart. So yeah,
great. Can you speak to, you're a young guy like me, so we don't have all that much experience, relatively speaking, to some of the folks I've been talking to, but in your life experience, like I did, you worked corporate for a number of years,
right.
And now you're working local, and can you offer one lesson or one piece of advice to anyone who might see this from your life as an organizer of community, an entrepreneur, someone who's worked in many worlds?
Yeah, I think, let me just think about that for a second. I think my lesson would go back to my answer to one of your previous questions, which is simply that not only is it really truly beneficial and great to support local businesses, as we're seeing, but it is really great to work for a local business as well. And part of what we're trying to do here in Manchester is not only bringing in, local commerce from consumers on an everyday basis, but how do we generate that business-to-business commerce as well? And I think the more people in a community like this that can see the value in working for a local business and in shopping at local businesses, it sort of becomes a local lifestyle. For me, I think that would be one of the lessons. And when I worked for the chain that I was working for, we would often try to put on events, and it was very market driven. There was a lot of marketing that went into these events. There were thousands and thousands of dollars that were spent, for advertising. But I always saw, no matter the demographic, and I worked in multiple stores in this chain, I always saw a bit of a hesitation on people's part to take part in these events, because I think there was always that little bit of a mindset with some of our customers of, well, this is a chain, first of all. What are they getting out of this? A lot of consumers today, I think, feel kind of trapped in a way by the chain or the big business mentality of, I don't want to say tricky marketing, but businesses obviously are always striving to grow. And I saw it as something where if there had been a similar business in the town that was very community oriented, that was not a chain, that was able to put on an event, it would have been much better attended. But I almost saw that the fact that, you know, people knew that we were a chain, people knew that money was not necessarily staying in the community, that they were supporting us. They weren't necessarily supporting their own lifestyle or community. And these were people that weren't necessarily that locally oriented, but I definitely saw hesitation there. So I think aside from working for a local business, just the power of the local ideal within any community out there can be very strong in terms of doing things like events. It was just another hurdle that we were constantly trying to get over when I was working for this company. And they tried to put a little spin on things like, oh, we're a good old local store, but people knew otherwise, and that's not to decry, all chains out there, certainly, but I just think that customers being as savvy as they are nowadays, they see the bigger picture.